Welcome to the Psychology Undergrad.
Hey everyone.
If you've spent, I don't know, the last 72 hours basically living inside the review guides for PSYC 3451,
Oh, I feel that.
if your notes are color-coded to a point that's, like, actually insane, and you're trying to cram 15 weeks of adolescent development into your brain,
Then you are in the right place.
you are exactly where you need to be.
We feel that pressure. And look, this isn't just a summary. We're treating this as the high stakes, all-in review session you need to walk into that final feeling, well, feeling like you've actually got this.
Yeah, completely prepared. Our goal here is to really synthesize the densest stuff, define the key concepts, but also, build the arguments for those long answer questions.
Exactly.
We've been looking through the practice materials, and the mission's pretty clear. We have to stop thinking about these as just flashcard terms.
Totally.
We need to see them as interconnected ideas. Like, it's not enough to know what the HPG axis is. You need to know why it completely changes how we should think about that whole storm and stress myth.
Right. That's the analytical part. So we've organized this deep dive by chapter, by theme, to make sure we go deep enough on the big concepts, things like Moffitt's two offenders or the brain's CEO versus the engine, stuff that's guaranteed to get you those high marks.
Exactly. So we're going to slow down, really explore the implications, and use some analogies that hopefully will make these ideas stick when you're under pressure.
Let's do it.
Okay, let's jump straight into the biology. Chapter 1 is where it all starts. It gives us the foundational science, and really importantly, it sets up the main argument you'll need for that first long answer question.
The one about the myth of biologically mandated upheaval.
Precisely. So to even begin to understand puberty, you have to start with the system that runs the whole show.
The endocrine system.
The endocrine system. At its simplest, it's basically the body's chemical network. It's the whole system that produces, circulates, and, regulates hormones.
It's kind of like a super specialized postal service, right? Instead of mail, it's sending out chemical instructions.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And those instructions are the hormones. They're these powerful little molecules that are secreted by glands.
Right. And they travel through your blood, but they only affect specific target cells. So they're like these very precise chemical envoys.
And the really cool part, especially for adolescents, is the hierarchy. The chain of command.
Okay, so at the very top, you've got the boss in the brain. That's the hypothalamus. It's constantly monitoring everything internally.
Then the hypothalamus gives its orders to the manager.
The pituitary gland.
The pituitary gland. The master gland. It gets the orders and then, pushes out the hormones to the rest of the body. Like the CEO telling the regional offices what to do.
And in this case, those regional offices are the gonads.
The testes and ovaries.
Exactly. And when they get the signal from the pituitary, they kick into high gear and start producing the main sex hormones, androgens and estrogens. That whole process is the engine of puberty.
So the big question is, what stops this system from just going crazy? From creating those raging hormones we always hear about.
Okay, so that's the genius of the set point and the feedback loop.
Right.
The set point is just that level the body is trying to maintain. Think of it like the thermostat setting in your house. It's a settled place.
And the feedback loop is the thermostat in action.
Right, which we call the HPG axis.
Hypothalamus, pituitary, gonads.
Exactly, the HPG axis. So using that thermostat analogy, when the hormone level in the blood drops too low,
the temperature drops.
Right, the hypothalamus, which is the thermostat, signals the gonads, the heater, to turn on. As the hormone level rises, the hypothalamus registers that the set point's been reached, and it signals the heater to turn off.
And that's the absolute key for the essay question. The HPG axis is always running, even in childhood. It's just maintaining a really low, steady set point.
Right. So when puberty starts, it's not a new system turning on. It's just the thermostat getting cranked way, way up. The body's just trying to maintain a much higher level of hormones that were already there.
We're definitely coming back to that.
So that leads to the next question, right? What flips the switch? What cranks up that thermostat?
Yeah, what's the actual trigger?
It's not just one thing. It's more like a whole constellation of chemical signals that basically tell the body, okay, we're ready for reproduction now.
And the main start button for all of that is a chemical called kisspeptin.
Kisspeptin. It's the neurotransmitter that basically kicks off the whole pubertal process. It stimulates the hypothalamus, which gets the whole HPG axis going.
But what controls the kisspeptin?
See, that's where it gets really interesting, where biology and environment meet. You have leptin.
Leptin, that's the protein from fat cells, right?
Exactly. So leptin is basically the body's energy meter. If your body fat, the lipids, reaches a certain level, leptin levels go up. And that sends a signal that says, hey, we have enough energy reserves to, theoretically support a pregnancy.
And that's a huge factor in the secular trend we'll talk about.
A huge factor. And then working against it, you have melatonin, the sleep hormone.
Right, which suppresses kisspeptin.
Exactly. So throughout childhood, you're sleeping more, you have high melatonin levels, and that sort of keeps a lid on the whole system. As puberty approaches, melatonin production drops a bit, and that releases the brake on kisspeptin.
It's wild that something as simple as sleep patterns plays such a direct role.
It's all connected. So once that signal is finally sent, we get the adolescent growth spurt.
That super rapid, sometimes awkward, increase in height and weight.
And this is always a key point for any exam questions that ask you to compare things, the timing.
Yes, this is an exam Q2 concept right here.
Yeah.
You just have to remember the growth spurt starts about 2 years earlier for girls than for boys.
Right. So girls are starting around 10 or 11, boys are more like 12 or 13. And that timing difference creates a lot of interesting social dynamics in middle school.
For sure. But the growth spurt does end. And that's marked by something called epiphysis.
Epiphysis. It's basically the closing of the ends of the long bones. The cartilage hardens, the bones fuse, and that's it. No more height growth.
And while that's happening, we're also tracking the secondary sex characteristics.
These are the visible surface signs of maturity. Things like breast development, pubic hair, voice deepening.
They're not directly needed for reproduction, but they signal that you're capable of it.
And researchers track all this using the Tanner stages. It's just a standardized scorecard, really, for physical maturation.
And for girls, the big milestone everyone knows is menarche.
The first menstrual period.
Which brings us back to that big picture idea, the secular trend.
Right. The historical data that shows the average age of menarche and puberty in general has been getting younger and younger over the past century or so.
All because of better nutrition and health. That leptin threshold is just being met earlier.
And this is where you have to start making those analytical connections for the exam. If biology is making adolescents physically mature earlier, but society keeps pushing back the age of adult responsibilities.
Like getting a job, a driver's license, moving out.
Exactly. You create this widening gap. And that gap itself becomes a major source of stress in modern society. The biological clock is just ticking way faster than the social clock.
That's a great way to frame it.
Okay, let's hit written exam Q1 head on. You have to be able to argue against that old idea of adolescent storm and stress.
Yeah, that idea that it's this inherently turbulent time that's caused only by new hormones flooding your body and making you emotionally chaotic.
The idea from guys like G. Stanley Hall, who thought this turmoil was just a universal biological thing you had to go through.
So we have to use our knowledge of the HPG axis to take that apart.
Right. The physiological facts are your best evidence. And here's the line you have to repeat. The endocrine system does not produce new hormones during puberty.
That's the core of it. The hormones, the androgens like testosterone and the estrogens, they've been in the body since before you were born. The HPG axis was just keeping them at a really low level.
What changes two things. First, that set point gets cranked way up. And second, and this is just as important, the developing brain, especially the limbic system, becomes way more sensitive to those hormones that are already there.
So it's not the chemical, it's the brain's reaction to the chemical.
Exactly. It's not just the quantity, because if it were, you could give kids supplemental hormones and it would cause all this emotional chaos, but it doesn't.
Research shows that hormone levels correlate with some things, like testosterone and sensation seeking.
Right, but they don't directly cause things like depression or anxiety. The link isn't that simple. In fact, a lot of studies show that the mood changes actually start before the big hormone spike.
Which suggests it's more about the social stress of the whole transition.
It is. And you also have to consider the stress system. At the same time this is happening, the adrenal glands are maturing, a process called adrenarche. And that leads to more production of stress hormones like cortisol. So if an adolescent is feeling more stress from school, from peers, whatever, their whole system is just more reactive.
So the emotional turbulence is way better explained by the interaction between a super reactive brain, a ton of social stress, and Yeah, adjusting hormone levels.
Right. It's not some simple hormonal mandate.
Well,
So your conclusion for Q1 has to be that the physiological facts argue against this idea of biologically required upheaval. The storm and stress story is more about culture and environment than it is about inevitable hormonal chaos.
okay, so moving from the body's hardware to the brain's software. Chapter 2 is all about that explosion in thinking ability that really defines the adolescent mind.
And the fundamental shift here is the emergence of metacognition.
Metacognition. Thinking about thinking.
Yeah, it's the ability to monitor your own thought processes, to think, how am I going to study for this exam? Or do I really understand this concept? It's like a huge upgrade to your internal operating system.
You're not just doing it anymore, you're aware of how you're doing it.
Exactly. But like with any big upgrade, there are some bugs at first, some awkward side effects.
Yeah, which we see in adolescent egocentrism.
Right. That intense self-absorption where teens just become preoccupied with themselves and how they appear to everyone else.
And this egocentrism shows up in two really important ways for the exam. The first one is the imaginary audience.
The imaginary audience. This is the belief that everyone is constantly watching you, scrutinizing you, judging you.
It's what makes walking through the school cafeteria feel like you're walking onto a stage with a giant spotlight on you.
Totally. It's why a tiny pimple or a stain on your shirt feels like this catastrophic world-ending event, because in your mind, everyone sees it and everyone is judging you for it.
And the second one, which has more serious consequences, is the personal fable.
The personal fable. This is the belief that your own experiences and feelings are totally unique.
No one has ever felt this way before.
Exactly. And because you're so unique, you believe you're basically immune to the normal rules or consequences. It's this personal fantasy of being special and invincible.
And this is exactly what you need for that Dave drinking and driving question, right?
Yeah.
Exam Q4.
Yes. Dave knows that, in general, drinking and driving is dangerous. He's not stupid.
But his personal fable says, yeah, but that's for other people. Bad things happen to other, less special people. I'll be fine.
And that's a huge barrier to rational decision-making. The personal fantasy of being invincible just overrides the logical assessment of the risk. The thrill feels real, but the danger feels abstract, like it only applies to other people.
Okay, so shifting from those side effects to the actual structure of thought, we have to talk about Piaget.
Piaget's cognitive developmental view. He argued that our thinking ability doesn't just increase smoothly, it grows in these big qualitative steps or stages.
And the final stage, the one that's relevant for adolescence, is formal operations.
Formal operations. This stage has two main characteristics. First is flexible and abstract logic.
So you can think about things that aren't concrete, like justice or infinity.
Right. And second, and this is a huge one, is advanced hypothetical thinking.
This is a major concept. Before this, kids are kind of stuck in what's real, what's right in front of them.
Exactly. Hypothetical thinking is that if-then ability. It's being able to think about possibilities that are contrary to fact. You know, if the world had no laws, what would happen?
It's what allows you to really get into complex moral debates or question authority based on principles, not just rules. You're no longer bound by what is. You can now think about what could be.
So what Piaget gave us those big stages, there's another perspective.
The information processing perspective.
Right, which views the brain more like a computer, like an Intel processor. It focuses on the components, like memory and attention, and how they get better and faster.
So our processing speed definitely gets a big boost. We get much better at using our mental resources.
Totally. Take attention. We get way better at selective attention.
Just tuning out all the distractions to focus on one thing.
Right. But we also get better at divided attention, which is, actual multitasking.
Double focus.
Exactly. And our memory systems get a huge upgrade, too. Working memory, which is like your brain's active scratch plate for what you're doing right now, gets bigger and more efficient.
And our long-term memory is obviously massive. But there's that interesting finding, the reminiscence bump.
Oh, yeah, the reminiscence bump. It's the finding that when older adults look back on their lives, they remember a crazy amount of stuff from their adolescence and early adulthood.
It's like a peak of really bright, vivid memories.
Which suggests that because everything is so new and emotionally intense during that period, the brain just encodes it all much more strongly.
Okay, but the really deep dive here is the physical rewiring of the brain. The actual hardware is getting a major overhaul.
And that involves two huge biological processes, pruning and myelination.
Synaptic pruning. This is all about optimization.
Right. In childhood, your brain just goes wild, creating tons and tons of connections between neurons. Pruning is the process of getting rid of the connections that are inefficient or that you don't use.
It's like a gardener trimming a rose bush. You cut back the weak branches so the strong ones get all the resources and grow even stronger.
It's a use it or lose it principle, and it makes the brain way more efficient.
So pruning makes it more efficient, and myelination makes it faster.
Exactly. Myelin is this fatty sheath that wraps around the axons of the neurons. It's like insulation on an electrical wire.
And the thicker the insulation, the faster the signal can travel.
And this process of myelination just goes into overdrive during adolescence, especially in the prefrontal cortex. It makes the brain's circuits work so much faster.
And all of that brings us to the central neurological concept for the exam, the classic CEO versus the engine analogy.
Yes, this explains so much about teen risk-taking and emotional intensity. It's all about the different rates of maturation in different parts of the brain.
So let's break it down. You have the prefrontal cortex, the PFC,
PFC is the CEO. It's the part of the brain responsible for executive function.
which is all the high-level stuff: planning, impulse control, weighing consequences, making judgments.
And the crucial thing to remember is that this part of the brain is the last to fully mature. It's still developing well into your mid-20s.
Meanwhile, you have the limbic system.
The limbic system is the engine. It's a much more primitive part of the brain that's all about processing emotions, social information, and especially rewards.
And this system gets its makeover much, much earlier in adolescence. It becomes highly sensitive and super reactive.
So you have this huge developmental mismatch. You've got a supercharged, highly sensitive emotional engine
The limbic system,
running at full throttle way before the brake system, the CEO,
the PFC,
is fully developed enough to control it.
and that mismatch leads to a couple of really important things.
First, just more emotionality in general. Mood swings, intense feelings.
And second, and this is where that tricky exam question comes in, you see an increased responsiveness to rewards and immediate gratification.
Yes. The exam might try to trick you and say decreased responsiveness, but it's the opposite. When an adolescent brain's limbic system sees a potential reward, like the thrill of a risk or social approval, it lights up way more intensely than an adult brain.
And that's driven by the chemical messengers, right?
Totally. You have a surge in dopamine, the desire and reward chemical, which makes those risky things feel even more pleasurable. And at the same time, serotonin, the mood stabilizer, is also fluctuating, which just adds to the mood swings.
So to sum it up,
Yes.
it's not that teens can't think rationally. Their PFC can do it.
Right.
It's that when they're in a situation that's emotionally charged, or when there's a big immediate reward on the table,
The emotional engine just fires so intensely that it overrides the CEO before the rational thought can even get a word in.
all right, let's totally shift gears and look at how society deals with this newly wired, rapidly maturing person,
Chapter's full. This is all about social redefinition.
which is just the process where society officially changes your status from a kid to an adult. It's like a social rebirth where you get new rights and also new responsibilities.
And this is why we have to understand the inventionists.
Okay, the inventionists.
They're the theorists who argue that adolescence as we know it, this distinct stage between childhood and adulthood, was largely invented.
Not a purely biological thing.
Right. It was created by social forces like mandatory high school, child labor laws, things that extended the period of dependency on parents. It's a social construct.
And that invention leads to really different ways of becoming an adult. We have to compare continuous transitions and discontinuous transitions.
Right. So a continuous transition is gradual and constant. Think about a traditional farming culture. A kid slowly takes on more and more adult work over many years. They're kind of wading slowly into the pool of adulthood.
By 15, they might already be a full participant in the family's work.
Exactly. A discontinuous transition is the opposite. It's abrupt, a dramatic drop.
That's modern Western society.
Totally. We keep adolescents separate from the adult world for years, no real work, mandatory school, and then at 18, we suddenly expect them to know how to vote, join the military, manage money.
It's just thrown off the diving board.
You are, and that abruptness can create a lot of stress.
Many cultures use initiation ceremonies to help with this.
Right, these formal rituals that clearly mark the change in status. And importantly, a lot of these ceremonies have a moral component. You have to show you understand the community's values or endure some hardship to prove you're ready for responsible adulthood.
And on the legal side of things, we have to define a status offense.
Simple definition. A status offense is an act that's only illegal because of your age or your seniority.
Like skipping school, running away, or underage drinking.
The minute you turn 18 or 21, those exact same behaviors are no longer illegal, which just shows how much of this is about a social definition of what a minor is.
Okay, so if the family is the core system, the peer group is the social lab.
For sure. Chapter 5 gets into all the peer dynamics, starting with something basic. Sex segregation. That's an exam Q8 concept.
Sex segregation is just that tendency for kids in childhood to separate by gender and play in same-sex groups.
Boys play with boys, girls play with girls. It's super strong in childhood, but it starts to break down in early adolescence as puberty and romantic interests kick in.
Now, we have to nail the difference between cliques and crowds. People always mix these up.
Always. Okay, so cliques are small. They're tight-knit, close, intimate, inner circles, usually like 2 to 12 people.
This is your main group of friends. It's where you learn all your social skills, get emotional support.
Right, and they're usually same-sex in early adolescence, but then they start to merge and become mixed-sex in middle adolescence. That's the context for exam Q11.
Okay, so cliques are who you hang out with. What are crowds?
Crowds are totally different. They're big reputation-based categories or stereotypes. Jocks, nerds, preps, goths.
You don't necessarily hang out with everyone in your crowd.
Not at all. It's more of a label. It acts as a reference group. It's a social yardstick that tells other people and yourself who you are and what you value.
Okay, that makes sense. And within these groups, we see different kinds of popularity.
Yes. There's sociometric popularity, which is how genuinely well-liked you are. It's about being kind, friendly, true sweetness.
And then there's perceived popularity.
Perceived popularity is all about status, prestige, and coolness. These are the influential kids, but they aren't always actually well-liked. Sometimes they're feared or just seen as powerful. The two types are very different.
And when things turn negative, we often see relational aggression.
Yeah. The mean girls behavior. It's non-physical aggression that's all about ruining someone's social standing or relationships, spreading rumors, exclusion, gossip.
A psychological quirk that can fuel aggression is the hostile attributional bias.
This is a big one. It's the tendency to interpret ambiguous actions from others as being intentionally hostile.
So if someone bumps into you by accident in the hallway,
Your first thought is, they did that on purpose to disrespect me. And you react aggressively, hitting back early.
which brings us to a super important concept for anyone thinking about interventions: iatrogenic effects.
Iatrogenic. It's a fancy word that just means the treatment or the intervention actually makes the problem worse.
It increases the problem it was trying to solve.
Exactly. The classic example is deviancy training. You take a bunch of high-risk teens and put them in group therapy together.
And what happens?
If it's not structured really well, they just end up teaching each other how to be better delinquents. They trade tips, reinforce bad behavior, and they can actually come out worse than they went in.
Okay, Chapter 6, the school environment. This is where adolescents spend most of their time.
Right. And in the U.S., most teens go to a comprehensive high school. It's that all-in-one school model that has a bunch of different curriculum tracks for students of all abilities.
And inside those schools, you often have tracking.
Tiering, putting students into fast or slow lanes based on their perceived ability.
Proponents say it customizes learning, but critics argue it can really hurt the self-esteem of kids in the lower tracks and just reinforce social inequality.
It's a big debate. Now, exam Q12 hits on school size.
Right, small schools versus large schools. What does the research say?
It says that students in small schools, like under 400 or 500 kids, are way more likely to participate in extracurriculars.
Because they have to. In a small school, you're the star of the show by default. The drama club needs you to run the lights. The basketball team needs you as the sixth man. You feel necessary.
Exactly. Whereas in a big school, while there are more options, more AP classes, more clubs, the average student feels less personal obligation to join in. The opportunities are there, but you can be more anonymous.
Okay, let's tackle a big one. Written exam Q4. Why do academic motivation and grades so often drop off a cliff when kids transition to middle school?
The main theory is the stage-environment mismatch.
Stage environment mismatch.
Okay, so think about what an early adolescent needs developmentally. They're craving more autonomy, more choice, closer relationships with adults who aren't their parents.
They want to be treated less like a little kid.
Exactly, but what does the typical middle school environment give them?
The exact opposite.
Right, they go from one teacher who knew them really well to 6 teachers who don't. The rules get stricter, there's more public comparison of grades, less autonomy over your work.
So the environment is mismatched with their developmental needs.
Perfectly mismatched. And that causes a big drop in student engagement, which is just that psychological energy and commitment to learning. They feel controlled and unsupported, so they just check out.
So what's the solution? What's the intervention part of the answer?
Parental involvement.
Hmm.
The research is really clear that when parents stay involved, maintain high expectations, and provide a lot of emotional support during that transition, it can seriously buffer those negative effects. The support at home makes up for the lack of support at school.
Okay, back to the family. Chapter 4 frames it all through family systems theory.
Right. The main idea here is that the family is an interconnected system. The classic analogy is a mobile hanging over a crib.
If you touch one piece.
The whole thing shakes. Every other part has to adjust. So when the adolescent starts puberty, it affects the parents, the siblings. The entire family system has to find a new balance.
It's a great framework. And it leads us to the most famous concept from this chapter, the 4 parenting styles. This is prime exam Q9 territory.
Okay, so they're based on 2 dimensions: warmth or responsiveness and demandingness or control.
And the best one, the gold standard, is authoritative parenting.
The Goldilocks parent. They are high on both warmth and demandingness. They're warm and supportive, but they also have clear rules and high expectations. They're talkative, involved, very effective.
Their kids tend to have the best outcomes. More responsible, better in school.
Then you have the other 3. Authoritarian parents are high on demandingness, but low on warmth.
The drill sergeant.
Exactly. Rigid rules, obedience above all else, very little warmth or discussion.
Then indulgent parents are the opposite. High on warmth, but low on demandingness.
The best friend parent. Incredibly easygoing, lots of love, but no rules or limits.
And finally, the worst outcomes are associated with indifferent parents.
Low on both. They're basically ignoring the kid. No warmth, no rules, no support, just absent.
We also have to flag a really negative type of control, psychological control.
This one is insidious. It's not about setting rules for behavior, it's about trying to control the teen's emotions and opinions.
Guilt tripping, withdrawing love.
Pulling emotional strings. It's super damaging to a teen's ability to develop their own sense of self.
And in immigrant families, you can sometimes see generational dissonance.
That's the cultural tug-of-war. You have parents holding on to traditional cultural values and their American-born kids who are assimilating really fast into Western culture.
And that creates conflict over things like dating or personal freedom.
It really does. And it often highlights the concept of familism.
The family-first attitude.
Right, the idea that the needs of the family as a group come before the desires of any one individual, which can clash pretty hard with that Western adolescent drive for personal identity and autonomy.
Which is a perfect segue to Chapter 8 and the huge task of identity formation.
Exam Q14 reminds us that this isn't like flipping a switch. Identity is a series of interrelated developments. It's about how your self-concept, your self-esteem, your whole sense of self evolves over time.
And Erickson defined the big crisis of this stage as identity versus identity diffusion.
The goal is to achieve a solid sense of self, a coherent idea of who you are, what you believe in, where you're going.
And the alternative is diffusion, a scattered self, feeling disconnected, no direction, no commitments.
So the healthy way to get to a solid identity is through a psychosocial moratorium.
That's a key term. It's a moment of exploration, a timeout.
Yeah, like a gap year for your soul. Society gives you this period to experiment with different roles, different beliefs, without the pressure of having to commit to something forever.
What are the unhealthy paths?
Well, there's identity foreclosure. That's when you just skip the exploration part entirely. You fast forward to a commitment.
Like deciding to be a doctor just because your parents always wanted you to, without ever asking if you want it.
Exactly. And then there's negative identity.
This is when you deliberately choose an identity that's seen as bad or undesirable by your family or society, being naughty to be noticed. It's often a form of rebellion against an identity that's being forced on you. And this all relates directly to written exam Q5 and false self-behavior.
Right. This is when a teen acts in a way they know is phony or inauthentic, usually to impress other people or to hide parts of their true self.
Like being one person with your friends, a totally different person with your parents, and another person entirely on a date.
That's a perfect example, and it's most common in early adolescence, especially in romantic situations, because that need for approval is just so high. It's a sign that they haven't really solidified their true identity yet.
On a broader note, there's the immigrant paradox.
This one's fascinating. It's the finding that first-generation immigrants often do better in terms of health, academics, than later generations who are born in the U.S.
They're impressively strong. It's thought to be linked to things like strong family values and community support.
Okay, let's clear up a huge misconception. Exam Q15, self-esteem and achievement. Which one causes the other?
The popular wisdom is that if you just make a kid feel good about themselves, if you boost their self-esteem, they'll suddenly start succeeding.
But the research just doesn't back that up.
It's the other way around.
It's the other way around. The data overwhelmingly shows that achievement attracts esteem.
So succeeding at something, demonstrating competence, that's what makes you feel good about yourself.
Exactly. Self-esteem is more of a consequence of success, not the cause of it.
All right, Chapter 9, the final big transition, autonomy.
And exam Q16 is all about understanding the nuance here. It's not the same as just being independent.
It's not. Independence is more about behavior. It's inaction. It's the capacity to do things on your own without your parents helping. But autonomy is bigger. It's all around self-governance.
Right. It includes the emotional and the cognitive pieces. You can be independent, you can live on your own, but still not be autonomous if you need your parents' approval for every single decision you make.
We break autonomy down into 3 types. First is emotional autonomy.
Emancipation from need. It's about your relationship with your parents shifting from one of dependency to one that's more mutual, more adult-like. You're not running to them for emotional validation for everything.
Then there's behavioral autonomy.
That's the one that's closest to independence. It's about being the boss of your own decisions and actions.
And finally, cognitive autonomy.
Having your own convictions, thinking for yourself, developing your own set of values and beliefs, not just inheriting them from your parents or your friends.
And exam Q18 makes a key point about how this develops. It's not a sudden rebellion.
No, absolutely not. The research shows it's gradual and progressive. It's a slow, steady process, especially when parents are authoritative and grant more freedom as the teen shows they can handle it.
And that cognitive autonomy is directly linked to morality. Exam Q17 touches on the connection between moral reasoning and moral behavior.
Yeah, the basic finding is that people who can reason about moral issues at a higher, more sophisticated level, they have a higher head.
They tend to behave more ethically in real life. They have a higher habit.
Exactly. But we also have to account for moral disengagement.
This is how people justify bad behavior to themselves.
It's that inner monologue, the rationalizations you use to drop the rules. It's okay to cheat because the test was unfair or everyone else is doing it.
Lastly, we need to distinguish between religiosity and spirituality.
Right. Religiosity is the ritual, the outward stuff. Going to church, following the formal doctrines, the practices.
And spirituality is the searching.
The personal quest for meaning, for purpose, for connection to something bigger than yourself. And what we see is that while religiosity often declines in adolescence, that inner searching spirituality often stays the same or even increases. It's part of that cognitive shift toward abstract thought.
Okay, last major section. Psychosocial problems and interventions.
Chapter 12 starts with achievement motivation. And we have to contrast 2 types.
Mastery versus performance motivation.
Right. Mastery motivation is learning for the sake of learning. You want to master the material because you find it interesting.
And performance motivation is learning for the prizes, the grades, the praise, the external rewards.
And if you're driven by performance, failure can be devastating, which can lead to learned helplessness.
That feeling of hopelessness, where you start to believe that failure is inevitable no matter what you do, so you just stop trying.
The powerful antidote to that is the growth mindset.
Carol Dweck's work, the idea that your brain is a muscle.
Exactly. The belief that your intelligence isn't a fixed thing. It's something that can grow and develop with effort.
And these things, mastery motivation, growth mindset, grit, they're all non-cognitive factors.
Right. They're not smarts. They're the personality traits and skills that often predict success even more than raw IQ does.
Okay, Chapter 13, delinquency. We usually classify problems as either externalizing,
Acting out. Aggression, delinquency, exit behaviors.
or internalizing.
Acting in. Anxiety, depression. Inward behaviors. And when they happen at the same time, we say they're comorbid. Co-occurring. Double trouble.
And written exam Q3 requires a deep dive on Moffitt's 2 offenders. This is a huge theory.
It's essential. It explains why most teen crime is just a phase, but for a small group, it's a lifelong pattern.
Okay, so offender type 1 is the life course persistent offender, the lifer.
These individuals start their antisocial behavior really early in childhood, and it often stems from underlying issues like neurodevelopmental problems or a really difficult home environment.
And the key psychological marker is callous unemotional traits.
Yes, a profound lack of empathy. They're cold, they don't feel guilt. And because the problems are so deep-seated, they are at very high risk for being criminals their whole lives.
Then you have type 2,
Yes.
the adolescence-limited offender, the passer.
Just like the name says, their delinquency begins and ends during adolescence. It's temporary, transitory.
And what's motivating them?
It's usually a kind of experimentation. It's a way to gain status with peers, to seem more adult, to claim some autonomy.
So they age out of it.
Exactly. Once they can get status and autonomy through legitimate adult roles, getting a job, moving out, the need for delinquency just disappears.
So for a counselor, you have to know the difference. Most of what you see, minor shoplifting, experimentation, is that adolescence-limited type. That's the core of exam Q13. The intervention should be about providing healthy ways to feel adult, not treating them like a future criminal.
All right, last chapter. Chapter 11, Sexuality and Health.
Exam Q19 is about positive sexual development. This isn't just about avoiding STDs or pregnancy.
Right. It's about achieving psychological and emotional maturity.
So key parts of that are being comfortable with your body, accepting your sexual feelings as normal, and this is the big one, making voluntary, ready choices.
It has to be planned and pleasurable, based on your own internal values, not pressure. So in that example, Ella, who waits until she's ready, is the model of positive development.
We also defined autoerotic behavior.
Sexual behavior you do alone, like masturbation, a totally normal part of sexual exploration.
And we have to mention LARC methods for birth control.
Long-acting reversible contraceptives, lastingly active. Things like IUDs or implants, they're super effective because you can set it and forget it. It removes the user error.
Finally, the most important intervention for exam Q20. What's the most effective form of sex ed?
Comprehensive sex education. It's the complete story.
It's proven to be the most effective because it doesn't just teach abstinence. It teaches about contraception, STDs, refusal skills.
And really importantly, it works to change peer norms by getting everyone accurate, non-judgmental information. It's just the approach that works.
Wow, okay. We have covered a huge amount of ground, from biological triggers and cognitive upgrades to social pressures and psychological problems.
We really did. So if you're cramming and you can only lock down 3 big analytical arguments, make them these. First, the HPG axis counterargument to storm and stress. It's not new hormones, it's new sensitivity in the brain.
Got it. Second, nail the difference between Moffitt's 2 types. The life course persistent lifer with deep-seated issues, and the adolescence-limited passer, who's just experimenting for status.
And third, be able to clearly articulate the difference between simple independence, which is just behavioral, and the much deeper all-around autonomy, which is emotional and cognitive.
Remembering that distinction is really the core of assessing whether someone is healthily moving toward adulthood.
And remember, learning all this stuff and learning it deeply is what builds your own intellectual resilience. That's your ability to function well, even under the stress of this exam.
The mastery you're getting right now is a skill you can use anywhere.
So, to leave you with one final thought, let's think about how all these systems, biology, stress, environment, all come together. Think about the diathesis stress model.
Okay, the diathesis stress model.
It says that problems don't just happen. They come from a combination of a pre-existing vulnerability, a diathesis, or the design, and an environmental trigger, the stress or the spark.
So you might have a genetic predisposition for anxiety, that's the design, but you need a specific stressor, like a big family conflict, the spark, for the disorder to actually appear.
Exactly. And you can take that one step further with the differential susceptibility theory, sometimes called the orchids versus dandelions idea.
I like that.
It suggests that not everyone is the same. Dandelions are resilient. They do okay in almost any environment, good or bad.
But orchids are different.
Orchids are the highly sensitive individuals. They get crushed by bad environments and high stress. They wilt. But, and this is the key, if you put them in a really positive, nurturing, supportive environment,
They thrive. They do better than anyone else.
they do exceptionally well. So how does knowing this change things? It means we stop asking what's wrong with this teenager, and we start asking how sensitive is this particular teen, and how well does their environment actually fit their needs?
That's a powerful shift. Good luck with your final review. You have absorbed so much material.
Really got this.
Now go crush that exam.